How's it going, everyone? This is Mitchell Mander here, and welcome to another review of the Boruto manga. Today we're going to be discussing Chapter 42, which just released today, which is titled Regeneration. And I have to say, I actually enjoyed this chapter quite a bit. There are some problems that I do have in this chapter, which I will address towards the end of this video, but overall, I thought this was a pretty good chapter. So before I get into the actual review, if you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe as I cover the Boruto manga on a monthly basis when the chapters release. Anyways, on to the review. So this month's chapter starts off where last month's chapter ended off at, in which Boro was running after Naruto's seal in an attempt to trick Kawaki and the rest of Team 7 in order to separate them so he can gain the advantage on them. And Kawaki falls for this as he is desperately trying to save Naruto. And as Boro is running towards the seal, he jumps out of the way at the last minute, tricking Kawaki, and he throws a bunch of shuriken at him. Kawaki attempts to block it with his extendable arm, and as soon as the shuriken hit him, they explode. Turns out that Boro mixed gunpowder with the viruses he scattered, and pretty much ignited as soon as it hit Kawaki's arm. So that means that fire and lightning style jutsus are pretty much out of the question when it comes to dealing with this gunpowder. Kawaki is pretty much injured from this, and Boro pretty much comments on how Kawaki has basically become soft since he moved to the Hidden Leaf Village and was under Naruto's care. So as a result, he's going to have to retrain, him and the rest of Kara are going to have to retrain Kawaki in order to, get him back to where he was before. And Boruto, I like this moment here where Boruto basically tells Boro off and tells him, no, that's not true anymore. He's a citizen of Konoha now, so he ain't going back to Kara. Though Boro himself wants Boruto as well. And then Mitsuki and Boruto engage Boro in battle, and eventually Kawaki joins them. And this is pretty much the theme for the rest of the chapter. Boro pretty much washes all of them. He pretty much destroys every single one of them, and I think this is probably the most injured we've probably ever seen Boruto in a fight in the entire series up to this point. He's pretty messed up by the end of this chapter. He's been punched in the face, slapped aside, punched several times in the face, I think, and kicked in the gut. So Boruto got a lot of abuse in this chapter, but as they're just continuing the fight and they try and blow him up, but he just keeps regenerating. Now as Boruto and Mitsuki are distracting Boro so that Kawaki can charge up an attack, he reveals some crucial information to Sarada in regards to Boro and the rest of Kara. When he talks about Kara, he mentions that he himself, along with the rest of Kara, have had their bodies remodeled by a guy named Armato. Armato may be a genius, however, there's a limit to his skill, and that in order for Boro to regenerate, he has to have a core. And that's a weakness for the scientific ninja tools, as the more powerful they are, the bigger they gotta be. And this core is probably the size of a heart. And Sarada even comments how they just kept blowing him up and yet they haven't destroyed his core yet. And Kawaki at this point pretty much tells Sarada that she needs to use her Sharingan to see if she can figure something out. And that's when he goes in to attack Boro himself. And as Boruto, Mitsuki, and Kawaki are pretty much getting washed, and they're pretty much running out of chakra, as pretty much the point of what Boro's doing is he keeps regenerating so that eventually they'll all run out of chakra and that'll be the end of the battle. Which this actually seems to be working as Boruto uses another Rasengan against Boro, in which of course he tanks it, regenerates, and at this point Boruto doesn't have enough chakra to use another Rasengan, so they can no longer use that option anymore to attack Boro with. Sarada, on the other hand, has been observing this battle at this point, and after talking with Kawaki, she's been basically paying attention to what's going on, and she realizes that when he's about to get attacked, he weaves hand signs, and it looks like some of the muscles in his body are basically being rippled, as if something's moving in his body, and that's when she comes to the conclusion that the core is actually moving around his body. That way, it's basically preventing him from getting killed whenever he's getting blown up by the two boys. Like if his top half of his body gets blown up, he can move his core down to the bottom half of his body to avoid it getting destroyed. Which this actually seems to be working as Boruto uses another Rasengan against Boro, in which of course he tanks it, regenerates, and at this point Boruto doesn't have enough chakra to use another Rasengan, so they can no longer use that option anymore to attack Boro with. Sarada, on the other hand, has been observing this battle at this point, and after talking with Kawaki, she's been basically paying attention to what's going on. And she realizes that when he's about to get attacked, he weaves hand signs, and it looks like some of the muscles in his body are basically being rippled, as if something's moving in his body. And that's when she comes to the conclusion that the core is actually moving around his body. That way, it's basically preventing him from getting killed whenever he's getting blown up by the two boys. Like if his top half of his body gets blown up, he can move his core down to the bottom half of his body to avoid it getting destroyed. Now Sarada realizes at this point something needs to be done, as she's pretty much figured out that the core is moving around his body, and she pinpoints where it's actually at right now. She would go tell Kawaki, Boruto, and Mitsuki where it's at, however he'd probably move it, as he'd pretty much catch on to what they're planning and move his core appropriately, and it would only just be a waste of chakra. So she realizes that she has to do it herself, as she came to the conclusion herself. So she tries to figure out a way to get him with a jutsu that's fast enough to where he can't weave signs to move the core around his body. And that's when she decides to whip out the Chidori, a move that she is still practicing, she hasn't mastered, and she's never used it in battle, so she doesn't even know if it's going to work. However, she doesn't have a choice. It's either now or never. So she pulls it out, and before Boro has a chance to react, she strikes him with the Chidori, and that's when the chapter ends. Now I do have two issues with this chapter. My first issue goes to Kawaki. I'm a little confused with him here, as he reveals this crucial information to Sarada in this chapter about Boro and his regenerative abilities and Kara's weaknesses, or Armada's weaknesses with his skill. I'm a little confused as to why Kawaki decided to reveal it now. I don't know why he didn't reveal it earlier when he had the chance. I almost feel like he should have just told everybody at the very beginning of the fight that Boro has regenerative abilities. If he knew this all along and knew basically his potential weaknesses, he could have actually given this information to Boruto and the others way sooner. So I kind of feel like this is a bit of a plot hole. So I don't know if it was because Kawaki was just so emotionally invested in trying to save Naruto, he just blocked it out of his memory, or he just wasn't thinking rationally, or what, but I feel like this was a bit of a plot hole, and I feel that this is some crucial information that Kawaki could have given to Sarada and Boruto way sooner, and this fight would have probably ended a lot sooner, as I feel like it's dragging on. And speaking of dragging on, I feel my second issue is definitely something that a lot of people are complaining about with this chapter, and it's something I had an issue with the Naruto versus Delta fight, and it's the pacing of some of the fights in the Boruto manga. And this fight is turning out to be probably the longest fight in the Boruto manga, and I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I feel like the plot is not really moving fast enough. I feel like we're kind of just stuck on this fight, and it's taking longer than necessary to end. So hopefully this fight either ends next chapter or it's already ended, or Sarada ended the fight, because the pacing in this fight, yeah, I feel like they're padding out way too much time on this fight, and it's taking a little bit too long to get done. But I'm still enjoying this fight. I just think the pacing should be probably a little bit faster, in my opinion. But I will say, Sarada knowing the Chidori was definitely the highlight of this chapter, and definitely one of the best moments in the chapter. And it was the end of the chapter, but it was definitely the best moment for me, as it felt like it came out of nowhere at first, but from what I understand, Sarada practices it in the novel, so I get the feeling that the anime is going to flesh this out a little bit better. That way, when this scene comes up in the anime, it doesn't feel like it came out of nowhere. So, I am actually pretty happy with this. I think it was handled a little bit better than the 3-tomo Sharingan in the manga, as she mentions in the chapter that she's still practicing it, so there's a chance that it's going to fail. But I do like the fact that Sarada was learning the Chidori. So yeah, that's definitely the chapter highlight. Not to mention it ends on a cliffhanger. I know the pacing in this fight has been kind of not the best, but I do think that ending this chapter off on a cliffhanger was the best way to end the chapter off. That way it keeps us all invested, just like Naruto Explained was talking about in his Boruto review, and how this keeps everyone on his toes, because who knows, for all we know the Chidori failed, and Boro's still going on, and he's gonna basically take Boruto and Kawaki with him. Or it worked, and the core is destroyed, and maybe Boro's not dead, but he's just neutralized. Like, the core is neutralized, so he can't really regenerate anymore, so he either has to retreat or run away or something. Now for chapter 43, not only am I hoping for a conclusion to this fight, I also want to get some more information on what else is going on. For example, Kashin Koji. Has he made it to the Kara hideout? Is he going to try and kill Jigen? Are we going to get a chapter of those two fighting? How about Sasuke? Has he woken up from his coma that Jigen put him in? How about Shikamaru? Is he still freaking out waiting for Boruto and the others to return? I just want to see some other things going on. That way the plot doesn't feel like it's being held up by this fight. And that's all I got for this review. Overall, it was a solid chapter with a few flaws and some pacing issues. So hopefully we get a conclusion to this fight in next chapter and we get to see some other things going on. Anywho, I give this chapter an 8 out of 10. So guys out there, what'd you think of this chapter? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Post your thoughts in the comment section down below and be sure to like and subscribe. And I will talk to you all later.